The divorce that seemed inevitable this offseason has reached a peak, with the Philadelphia Eagles agreeing to trade Carson Wentz, the number 2 overall pick in the 2016 draft, to the Indianapolis Colts, setting up a reunion with Frank Reich. This, of course, according to our Mike Garafolo. According to Mike's reporting, the Colts are giving up a 3rd rounder in the 2021 draft and a conditional 2nd rounder in 2022. This ends the Carson Wentz era in Philadelphia after he was handed a blockbuster contract earlier in his career. Once again, the number 2 overall pick, the number 1 overall pick, Jared Goff, in that 2016 draft, has also been shipped out of his original home. So Carson Wentz era in Indianapolis begins. Of course, Frank Reich, the head coach in Indianapolis, was his offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. Of course, it was Carson Wentz in 2017, his 2nd season in the NFL, led an MVP type of season before he was hurt against those Rams at the Coliseum. Nick Foles stepped to the forefront and led the Eagles to the Super Bowl win that season. Wentz returned in 2018, but again, his season was derailed, and Foles once again played heroics in the playoffs. In 2019, Foles made his playoff debut against the Seahawks in Philadelphia, was knocked out of that game with a concussion on a hit by Jadeveon Clowney, and the Eagles lost that game against Seattle. So Carson Wentz will begin anew with Frank Reich, the reunion in Indianapolis. As for the Colts, their future was derailed by the early retirement of Andrew Luck, a former number 1 overall pick. In 2020, they had Phillip Rivers step in to fill the gap and led them to the playoffs. But then Rivers retired in this offseason to set the stage for Indianapolis needing a quarterback. Let's send it out to Mike Garafolo now, who joins us live from his home after breaking this news. Mike, this was the divorce, as I mentioned, that seemed inevitable all offseason. What were the steps in line to make it happen now?
It was really the good cop back then. John DeFilippo, the quarterback's coach, he was known as the bad cop because he would coach him a little bit harder. But this is a guy right now in Carson Wentz whose confidence is hurt right now. There's no question about it. We saw it last year. Guys wide open. He just wasn't seeing them. He wasn't seeing the field the way he had been back a couple of years ago. And really, when he did coming out of the gate, I mean, there were questions about this guy coming from an FCS program up to the NFL level, and right away, in the first game he played against the Cleveland Browns with limited time in the preseason, because if you recall correctly, he got hurt, he looked like he belonged. He looked like a guy that can process things the way you need a quarterback to process things on the NFL level. And the Colts believe they can get that guy back. Frank Reich believes that he can get that guy back. This is a guy that just needs that confidence rebuilt, a little bit of love, a little bit of positivity, and now you've got an Indianapolis Colts team that we keep saying is a quarterback away, and they've been trying to plug the hole since Andrew Luck left. Well, the hope now for Indy is that they have found themselves a long-term solution in Carson Wentz. Meanwhile, on the other end of this trade, the Eagles turn things over to Jalen Hurts right now, and he gets a chance to prove himself that he is the starting quarterback and the franchise quarterback for this team in the long run, with Nick Sirianni as the new head coach in Philadelphia. If not, now Howie Roseman likely has got himself in a position where he will have multiple first-round picks in 2022, because that's how this trade is going to work. If Wentz plays 75% of the snaps or 70% and the Colts make the playoffs this upcoming season, that conditional 2nd rounder in 22 becomes a 1st rounder. It was extremely important for Howie Roseman to get a 1st-round pick plus in return for Carson Wentz, and in pretty much a likely sense, he got it here, because we would expect that Wentz, if he remains healthy, will play that many snaps for the Indianapolis Colts this upcoming season. That was something, by the way, that Roseman was telling folks all the way through, kind of like what the Rams did when they traded for Matthew Stafford. They gave up future first-round picks. Roseman said, if I can get my first-rounders, even if they're in the future, that is important for me. He didn't get multiple first-rounders. He got one, but he got the 1 plus the 3 this year. Likely the 1, excuse me. Got to make that clear. And that'll be the return that he wanted kind of as a base for Wentz. A 1st round and then another sweetener on top of it. Likely we'll get it here. The Philadelphia Eagles never got an official trade request or a threat from Carson Wentz and his representatives. But all along, they knew that he didn't want to be here anymore, that it had gotten to the point where it was beyond Doug Peterson. See, everybody, when Doug Peterson got fired, said, oh, there's the guarantee that Carson Wentz is going to be back. No, it was about more than Peterson. Wentz's feathers were ruffled in a lot of ways, and it extended beyond just the coaching staff this past season. He was upset with the drafting of Jalen Hurts. Obviously, that's pretty clear. That also seemed to mess with his head this past season, and I think that contributed to why he didn't play his best football. And going back to that situation was going to be really tough for Wentz, for Hurts, honestly, and for that entire locker room, because Hurts had won some people over with his play. Not necessarily that they were, oh, I'm Team Jalen and anti-Team Carson. That's not how it necessarily was going to work, but there were a lot of guys who looked at it and said, this is a guy that should be our quarterback going forward. So to bring Wentz back there into that situation would have made it extremely difficult for everybody. So while there was no formal trade request, or if you don't trade me, I'm going to do X, there was an indication toward the Eagles that, yes, Carson Wentz was not willing to come back, and best for the parties to part at this point.
Yeah, Mike, I can hear you now. Thank you very much. As for the future for Philadelphia, they have Jalen Hurts, who obviously was the second-round pick last year. Going forward, they have the number 6 pick in this year's draft. Where do they go from here at the quarterback position? Quarterback carousel continues. Carson Wentz is on the move, headed from Philadelphia to the Indianapolis Colts. According to our Mike Garafolo, the Colts are giving Philly a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional second-rounder in 2022. So the Carson Wentz era in Philadelphia, the number 2 overall pick in the 2016 draft, has come to an end. He is now in Indianapolis.